Aww. Alright, I gotta unlock it first. So, we're gonna play Pac-Man Arrangement next. But let me unlock it first. So, now we play Pac-Man Championship Edition. Let's play Pac-Man Arrangement Console version. Before we talk about Pac-Man Arrangement for the consoles, I wanted to bring up the period between when Pac-Man Arrangement came out in the arcade and when this game would finally release, because that's almost a whole decade's worth of content that isn't mentioned at all here in the Pac-Man Museum Plus. The biggest entries during this time were, without a doubt, the Pac-Man World series, Pac-Man World 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Pac-Man World was originally released in 1999 as an exclusive for the PlayStation, made to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the series, and the first attempt to revitalize Pac-Man for a new 3D gaming era. And it was well received for what it was. Now, was the game perfect? Not really. I mean, the biggest thing for me personally was the difficulty. But it was great to experience a new take on Pac-Man that not only felt fresh, but still had some of its maze-like roots integrated into its core gameplay. Plus, you have the whole Pac family, you have multiple environments. It was a good time. Pac-Man World 2 is the one best known by many fans in the franchise, and that was the one that first exposed me to the Pac-Man series outside of the maze formula. Pac-Man World 2 is often said to be the fan favorite, not just in the Pac-Man series, but by many fans that know Pac-Man as a character. And honestly, I'm all for that too. Pac-Man World 3 though would be a bit more subjective, as it wasn't handled by the same folks that did the first two games. It would take a much more different approach, including combat and its world setting. I didn't enjoy it personally. I know there are some that do. I think it's the weakest of the three. I don't think it's a bad game, but it's far from what the first two were aiming for. Also during this time though, we would also see the release of the Namco Museum, which was Namco's first original compilation meant to house many multiple arcade games, not just exclusive to one series. Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, and even some that never even came out in America were all on display here. Originally released for the PlayStation in 5 volumes, it would later find its way to other consoles for the next generation of gaming, such as the Nintendo 64. Now, honestly, I don't think anything could ever touch the original volumes. Just that's nostalgia talking here, which will be a common theme for this part in particular. But the fact is, we were able to get arcade emulation that was very close to the original hardware used in the arcade for the first time on home consoles. It may not seem like a big deal now, but for back then, that was revolutionary. Finally having the hardware to match what was happening in the arcades. If not perfect, it was extremely close. That's always cool to see. Let's jump ahead though to 2005. This would be the release of the Namco Battle Collection. More specifically, the Namco Museum Battle Collection for the PlayStation Portable in 2005. This was another attempt to essentially create some new arrangement titles for different Namco series. And of course, one of them was Pac-Man. And you're thinking, but wasn't there already a Pac-Man arrangement? You're not wrong. And I guess Namco knew this too, but they still went along with it anyways. And so we have Pac-Man Arrangement, known today as the console version. But for the longest time though, this was the version that Namco would always use in many of its different re-releases. And they were just kind of keeping the arcade version as a hostage for the longest time. My original exposure to Pac-Man Arrangement for consoles was through the Namco Museum Virtual Arcade, released for the Xbox 360. I would argue that this, for the time, was the best way to play it, being in high definition, for the most part. I mean, it's a PlayStation Portable game, so you can't really stretch it without seeing some things not look the prettiest. But that was my first exposure to it. Now, there is this bias though, because when you take something and it replaces the original, you can't help but blame it for being there. This is something that I'm sure many fans may feel the same way as, and now that we finally have the arcade version, I think I might have been a bit too hard on its release back when it did come out, and even today. But let's just see if it's able to redeem itself through this gameplay part, because honestly, my memories of this game in particular aren't the happiest. But hey, that's nostalgia blindness talking. So let's just find out. So after playing Pac-Man Championship Edition, I had to take a step back and recollect myself, because I felt like I was rambling on and the content wouldn't have been as good as a result. So now that I took a break, and this is officially the third record session of the Pac-Man Museum Plus, I think we're ready to get back into it and take it from a fresh start. So that said, up next is Pac-Man Arrangement Console version. And immediately I'm wondering, yep, okay, textures still look, ugh. Now, the thing is, I don't hate it, but a lot of things from the early 2000s to mid, especially stuff like the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, the graphics, especially the UI, have not aged very well. I'm certain I'll say something about this when I cover Pac-Man Championship Edition, but I don't think it looks pretty. I feel like they could have touched it up just a little bit, but in the name of preservation, it's there. And we got the music. Yep, you hear it on loop. Bop, 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 doo-doo-doo-doo. I can't believe I'm playing this again. I've always talked about this one in particular, but I've never actually had the guts to play it on the channel. But alright, let's just take a new game. Just like the original arcade version, we have a set of worlds. I believe there is 6 worlds in this one. And starting right off, we have a familiar world, and that is, of course, the Toy Box world, or simply known as the Block world. A little bit of a coffee break here. We see Pac-Man, fully rendered in 3D. Yeah, power pellets. Oh no, this... Plays fine though, I'll give that much. It's just, ooh, that UI just does not look like it's aged well. I don't know how it compares to, say, the 360 version through the virtual arcade, but it's pretty close. The one thing I'll give it for here is that this one actually is full screen. When it came out on the 360, they actually squished it a little bit to have like black bars. I don't know if it was the sides or the top and the bottom, but they did that because it wasn't one-to-one with the HD screen. Alright, stage clear. Pac-Man does his little dance, spins around. I don't know what to say about this, folks. I'll be honest here, I don't think this is a bad game, especially a far cry from stuff like Pac-Man that we saw before. What I will give this game props for is that it does take its own unique spin on the maze formula, and it tries to be something new, something that we haven't seen in a very long time. Because remember, it's been 9 years since Pac-Man Arrangement came out in the arcade. And although the Pac-Man World series would have its own forms of playable mazes, they were very different compared to what we see here. Personally, my favorite was Pac-Man World 2 because they nailed that formula with having Pac-Man be Pac-Man in that game, but still feel like it was from the original series in the arcades. People, the one nitpick with Pac-Man World's mazes is that it plays too much like Pac-Man World. I guess explaining it like that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it would have the triple health system where every time Pac-Man gets hit, a little bit of his health would be reduced. I liked it personally because it means you have more than one attempt at the stage before you lose a life. And you have multiple lives on that too. The thing though is that the lives are tied to the stages. So if you lose all your lives in the bonus, you lose all your lives in the main stage. If I'm remembering that right, of course. It was fundamentally flawed. Not awful, but definitely flawed. Pac-Man World 2 felt like it was closer to the arcade versions. Pac-Man World 3, it felt more like a mini game compared to what... Oh, I was on the dash pad! Alright. Just keep eating the pellets. It felt like it was a backstep compared to what we saw in the first 2 Pac-Man World games. Especially, every stage would be the same, looking like it came from the arcade Pac-Man with the blue pipes. I wasn't crazy about it. But then after that, we have Pac-Man Arrangement. Again, I just... I will say though, for what this game does have to offer, it is definitely different. it pulls a lot of elements from Pac-Man Arrangement's arcade version, like the dash pads we see here. We would see some other elements the further we get into it, though, like being able to jump in some instances. I don't think there is the candies from Pac-Man, but I don't know. I'm trying to remember that. I think they're different. I want to say, though, that they are similar to that. We'll talk more about that in the next game, but for now, let's just focus on getting through the stage. Honestly, my gripe with this game, aside from the lack of polish being a PSP game, is that it feels slower, more redundant. I'm almost comparing it to Pac-Mania in some ways. I don't know why. This feels like what Pac-Mania was. It tries to reinvent Pac-Man, but I don't think it does it very effectively, if that makes sense. Alright, if this is what I think it is, yep. This game would also feature boss fights. This one, though, is a little different in that before we get to the big guy we know from the arcade version, we actually take each ghost, well, individually. And it's not to say that each one's the same as this. We don't just keep going after each ghost and eating all the smaller ones. No, they do have distinct attack patterns. And this one, this is the most straightforward. It's just Blinky. He splits up into smaller versions of himself. But there'd be much more gimmicky-based bosses the further we get into it. That said, though, I don't want to go any further than this. I think we're only going to focus on the first two worlds. I feel like that's a good pace here. But if you do want to see me play more of this, then the best way to let me know is in the comments down below. Do I want to play more of this? Personally, no. But we'll get through it. We'll get through it. Alright, we got 3 more ghosts. You can see that Blinky's getting smaller and much faster, but he's focusing on the 4 corners. That's his entire spiel. But alright, stage clear. I would spin if I didn't have the green screen behind me, but so, you clear the world after 5 stages, you go to the next world, and I believe this is known as the Park. So, Pac-Man Arrangement for Consoles does have a lot more gimmicks compared to its arcade counterpart. Some of them are, you could say, obstacle-based, others are more nuanced, if I'll be honest here. So, the big gimmick of this world is opening and closing gates, which if you're not careful can either be a hindrance or can help Pac-Man in a tight spot. But I do like this park thing here. It actually kind of reminds me of Rally X Arrangement, where the whole first world was based on the original New Rally X, but it was in a park setting. So you had the topography, you had different statues. One statue of Pac-Man was in the game, actually. Flowers, of course. I like this. I like that it is still different enough that it feels like it's colorful, full of life. I think this was a good way to go about it. I still can't get past, though, that this one feels like it's aged poorly compared to some of the other games in this compilation. I think part of it just comes down to the look of it. I don't know how much you could polish this, but you can tell that they took something where it might have looked good on the PlayStation Portable and just tried to stretch it, upscale it. I don't know, I still get the same impressions I get back when I played this on the 360. Alright, ding ding ding. So let's get this going. Just like Pac-Man Arrangement the arcade, as you proceed through each of the levels, you actually see a bit of the world design change. Maybe not so much in this world in particular, but some of the later ones you do see like a bit of a difference. I know one of the worlds is like a city. You start on the rooftop, then you find your way down more in the underground part of it. A couple more pellets. Stage clear! Does his little spin and dances. So, just like Pac-Man Arrangements, where those were more bounce pad, this is just a simple teleporter. So this is where I think the stage design starts to feel a bit redundant, where, I don't know, it works, but you gotta ask, why did they think of it in the first place? This is certainly where it does feel a lot more slower compared to the arcade or some of the other games in the Pac-Man series. Personally, I'm just not too crazy about it. It just doesn't feel like Pac-Man to me, if that makes sense. Alright, eat all the ghosts. I'm actually surprised, though, that for them to name this Pac-Man Arrangement, The one major feature that was in that game is nowhere to be found here, and that was the 5th Ghost Kinky. I guess the ghost mutations were a one-off thing. I would love to see it come back in some way, shape, or form, but they just never did it after the arcade version. Stage clear. Alright, let's keep going. So, I may have been completely honest here, but the Xbox 360 wasn't the only way I played this way back when. The other way was actually back on iOS. iPod Touch to be more specific. And that was in its mobile port, known as Pac-Man Remix. It included not only this game, but it also featured the original Pac-Man to be played. That one felt like it was maybe a little more closer to the PSP version, just in terms of its overall style, because back then the iPod Touch was not as powerful as, say, the iPhone today. So there were things they just simply couldn't do that you could do nowadays. And I think it worked better on that console, personally. I think having the bit of the screen crunch, having the lower resolution frame rate, kind of owed it to what we saw for its PSP version. But here's what I was saying with the bosses earlier. You see that Pinky's got the UFO, and we're going to see some different boss patterns here. Well, we do have another boss fight, so let's take it on. The style, though, doesn't really change. The objective, of course, is still to get the power pellets and to take out all the ghosts. But the way that Pinky attacks is different compared to Blinky. And the same can be said for the other ghosts that we see later on. I think we're going to call it, though, after this world, because I do not want to go further with this game. I don't. I'm willing to play most games here in this compilation, but this is the one that's going to be on the back burner. Well, above Pack of Time, but still. Alright, so we gotta wait for the power pellet to spawn. She beams right on top of me. Let's summon them. Up top, to the right, down low. I like these flowers being like purple violet. Alright, power pellet me, come on. Alright, watch it for Pinky. Get it! Up top. One more to go. 2, 3. Oh, wait, there's one more! No! Whoa. I didn't know that. Wait, she's faster. Wait, whoa. Since when was Pink? No. The ghosts are never supposed to be faster than Pac-Man. I just found new ways to hate this game I didn't think were possible. For those that don't know, the ghosts have always been slower than Pac-Man. The reason they usually catch up to Pac-Man, though, is because of the pellets. Pac-Man's always been faster. What was that? Why was the ghost faster than Pac-Man? This makes me angry. Alright, that said, though, we're going to stop here. This is the city world I was talking about. It's pretty cool. The big gimmick here is being able to go to the upper level. Alright, power pellet. Get me out of here. Alright, quit. I've had enough of this. At least this one lets you continue where you left off. Alright, why? Return to the arcade, yes. So that was Pac-Man Arrangement Console version. It doesn't count. Oh, what is this? It doesn't count unless I get a game over. That's not cool. So if I want these missions, I'm gonna have to play and get game over, or play to the very end. Not today. Not in this part. So alright, Pac-Man Arrangement. We didn't get any missions for that, no unlockables, which personally really sucks. But at least that's one game we're done with. So next in the order of flows would have been... It's actually a bit of a mixed bag here, because in theory, you could go on to Pac-Man Championship Edition. But there was also a game that also came out in 2007. But if we're getting really technical, it actually didn't come out, well, it came out originally in 2005.